It started with laughter. Not the kind of laughter you hear when kids chase a soccer ball down a sunlit street, or when neighbors gather on porches swapping jokes. This was harsher. Sharp, cutting. It rang out in the middle of Main Street, broad daylight, echoing off the windows of the little diners and pawn shops that made up the old downtown strip. Officer Jason Crowley stood beside his patrol car, his aviator sunglasses perched low, his hand resting casually on his belt. He wasn't responding to a robbery, a call for backup, or even a traffic stop. He was laughing at a man sitting cross-legged on the curb, scruffy beard streaked with gray, jacket torn at the seams, holding a cardboard sign that read, "Hungry. Will work. God bless." The man's name was Thomas Reed. Locals called him Tommy the Ghost because he drifted through town like a shadow, silent, unnoticed, almost invisible. His eyes, though, carried a weight, a heaviness. But no one asked where it came from. They just saw a homeless man on the corner, muttering sometimes, staring other times, always clutching that battered sign. Jason snorted, decorated the sidewalk again. "Huh, Tommy? But you've never decorated anything in your life but that ratty coat." The bystanders chuckled awkwardly. The shame burned hot across Thomas's face, but he didn't speak. He simply lowered his head, the way soldiers sometimes do, not in surrender, but in memory. Jason turned back toward his car, still grinning, not knowing that what he dismissed as just another ragged nobody was about to unravel his entire view of honor, service, and justice. Because Thomas Reed wasn't just a homeless man. He was one Sergeant First Class Thomas Reed, Silver Star recipient, 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. A man who had carried brothers through fire and held dying men in his arms. But Crowley didn't know that yet, and by the time he did, it would be too late to take the laughter back. The town of Clearbrook sat quietly on the edge of the Midwest, the kind of place where time moves slower than traffic. Main Street had seen better days. The movie theater shuttered, the hardware store boarded up, and the only thing thriving was the payday loan shop on the corner. Most mornings, retirees sipped coffee at Mel's Diner while gossiping about local scandals, marriages falling apart, the high school team losing another season, or who might be stealing from the church donation box. For years, Thomas Reed was part of the background. Folks passed him without notice, like an old lamppost or a trash bin left out too long. Some dropped coins into his paper cup. Others muttered that he should just get a job. Few bothered to ask how a man with hands so steady and eyes so haunted ended up alone, begging on cracked sidewalks. The truth was complicated. Thomas had come home from his last deployment with scars no doctor could stitch. He'd seen too much, lost too much. When the army processed him out, he received medals, handshakes, and a folded flag. But no one gave him the tools to survive back in a world where grocery store aisles felt like battlefields and loud fireworks cracked open his chest with panic. Within 3 years, his marriage collapsed. Within 5, his house was gone. Within 6, his savings evaporated. Soon, he had nothing but his jacket, his sign, and the memory of brothers who didn't make a home. On that afternoon, Officer Crowley's mockery didn't end with laughter. When Thomas stood slowly, clutching a sign to his chest, Crowley barked, "Sit down. You're loitering. You think this sidewalk's your property? You can't just—" But Thomas, his voice hoarse but steady, interrupted. "I fought for this sidewalk, for this street, for this country. I bled so you could wear that badge." The words sliced through the hot air. The bystanders fell silent. Crowley smirked, trying to shrug it off. "Sure you did, hero. And I'm the President of the United States." It should have ended there. Just another insult hurled, another humiliation endured. But it didn't, because one of the onlookers, a teenager filming on his phone, posted the exchange online. Within hours, the video spread across Clearbrook, then the state, then beyond. "Officer mocks homeless veteran," blazed across the captions. Comment sections ignited. Was the man really a veteran? Or just another drifter spinning lies for sympathy? The town demanded answers. And suddenly, Thomas Reed wasn't invisible anymore. He was at the center of a storm. The police department launched a review, not into Crowley's behavior, but into whether Thomas was who he claimed to be, Captain Linda Mercer, a no-nonsense leader who'd buried her own father with military honors, wasn't about to let a scandal sink her department. "Find out who this man is," she ordered. "If he's lying, we'll expose it. If he's telling the truth." She paused, her jaw tightening. Then Crowley's in deep. Detectives pulled what little they could. Fingerprints, old arrest records for trespassing, a few citations for sleeping in parks. But when they ran Thomas's name through federal databases, something extraordinary surfaced. Sergeant First Class Thomas Reed. Silver Star, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. It was all real. The medals, the deployments, the commendations. Everything. Clearbrook had overlooked a war hero, laughed at him, and left him to rot on its sidewalks. But why? How did a man go from decorated soldier to Tommy the Ghost? And what else was hidden beneath the layers of this broken life? For Thomas, the sudden attention was suffocating. Reporters shoved microphones in his face. Old acquaintances crawled out of the woodwork, some apologizing, others seeking to exploit him. The weight of being seen again after years of being invisible left him spiraling between shame and pride. For Crowley, the laughter that once came so easily now turned to dread. Each day, his phone buzzed with threats, insults, demands for resignation. He told his wife it was all overblown, but at night, he stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment when Thomas's words hit like a bullet. "I bled so you could wear that badge." The community itself was torn. Some rallied behind Thomas, donating clothes, money, even a motel room. Others muttered he was just another addict, another drain on resources, playing the veteran card for sympathy. The divide ran deep, exposing the town's fractures between compassion and suspicion, between respect for service and dismissal of the broken. Just as sympathy began to swing in Thomas's favor, a darker rumor spread. Whispers claimed that during one of his tours, Thomas had been involved in an incident overseas, an operation gone wrong, civilians killed, questions buried. Some said it explained his haunted eyes. Others said it explained why the Army quietly discharged him rather than promoted him further. The investigation took a new turn. Reporters began digging. Former soldiers who had served with Thomas were tracked down, and names surfaced again and again. Operation Iron Dagger. The operation wasn't in any official record, but those who knew whispered it was bloody, chaotic, and stained with decisions no soldier should ever have to make. One evening, as the sun sank behind Clearbrook's water tower, Thomas sat alone on the curb outside Mel's diner. A shadow fell across him. He looked up, and there stood a man he hadn't seen in over a decade, a man in civilian clothes, but with the unmistakable bearing of a soldier. "Tommy," the man said quietly. "It's me, Alvarez, from Iron Dagger." Thomas's breath caught. Memories crashed back. The firefight, the screams, the decision that still clawed at his conscience. Alvarez's eyes were hard. "You know this won't stay buried forever. They're asking questions. About you, about what really happened." Thomas closed his eyes, the weight of a past he could never escape pressing down. The town thought the scandal was about a cruel laugh on a sunny afternoon. But it was only the beginning, because the truth about Operation Iron Dagger was about to surface, and it would tear open wounds far deeper than anyone imagined. The meeting with Alvarez rattled Thomas in a way no viral video, no jeering officer ever could. For years, he had carried his demons in silence. He drank them down when he could afford whiskey, drowned them in sleep when exhaustion allowed. But Alvarez's presence ripped the bandages clean off. Iron Dagger. The name itself was enough to trigger the echoes. A canyon village in Afghanistan. The choking dust. The thunder of gunfire. The faces. Some enemy, some not. Blurring together in the chaos. Thomas never spoke of it, not even to his ex-wife during their last fragile years together. He'd told himself silence was survival, that if he didn't give the memories words, maybe they couldn't consume him. But now, the past had a face. Alvarez's face. And it had come to Clearbrook. Meanwhile, Clearbrook buzzed like a hive. The video of Officer Crowley mocking Thomas had gone national. Late-night hosts cracked jokes about the cop who couldn't tell a hero from a hobo. Advocacy groups demanded justice. Veterans across the country sent letters, some angry, some tender, all outraged a man with Thomas's record had been discarded. But with the spotlight came scrutiny. Journalists descended on the town. They dug into Thomas's record, and in doing so, stumbled across whispers of Iron Dagger. What really happened during that op? One reporter asked on a live segment, and why are so many of Reed's former brothers silent or evasive? The town split down the middle. One camp saw Thomas as a victim of government betrayal, a hero broken by war and abandoned by the system. The other camp began muttering that maybe Crowley had been right, that maybe Reed wasn't the man people thought he was. The air grew heavy with suspicion, sympathy, and division. For Officer Jason Crowley, life had become a slow bleed. The department reassigned him to desk duty pending review. His neighbors whispered. His kids came home crying because classmates said their dad was a disgrace. And yet, Crowley refused to back down. He insisted Thomas was playing the system, that he had seen his type before, guys who claimed to be war heroes but were nothing more than drunks with tall tales. But in quiet moments, doubt gnawed. When he watched clips of Thomas's trembling hands holding that cardboard sign, or when he read about the medals, something inside him whispered that maybe he had mocked the wrong man. Maybe the real fraud was him, the officer who wore a badge but had never bled for anything greater than his own pride. Crowley drowned that whisper in defensiveness, but the whisper never left. Captain Linda Mercer wasn't satisfied with the basic record checks. Something about Iron Dagger bothered her. Too many redactions. Too many blacked-out lines in the after-action reports. She made calls to old military contacts. Most refused to talk. One, a retired colonel, finally broke his silence after a long pause. Linda, whatever Reed saw out there, whatever he did, it's not written down for a reason. They buried Iron Dagger because it was dirty. If you keep digging, you won't like what you find. She pressed. Dirty how? But the line went dead. Mercer leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily overhead. She had handled homicides, corruption cases, even cartel ties. But this smelled bigger. Something reaching far beyond Clearbrook. And for the first time, she wondered if Thomas Reed was not just a man broken by war, but a man carrying secrets that could blow open something much larger. Thomas didn't want to see Alvarez again. But Alvarez came anyway, appearing at the motel where sympathetic townsfolk had paid for Reed to stay temporarily. You think hiding works? Alvarez asked, voice low, eyes scanning the parking lot like he was still on patrol. They're looking, Tommy. Reporters. The army. Civilians. Somebody's gonna talk. And when they do, Iron Dagger's gonna surface. You can't outrun it. Thomas's fists clenched. Then why'd you come? To remind me? To make me drown twice? No, Alvarez's jaw tightened. To warn you, there are people who don't want the truth out. People who will make sure you stay a ghost if you try to speak. The implication was chilling. Not just shame, not just guilt, but danger. For the first time, Thomas realized the storm was not just personal. It was political. That night, Thomas dreamed again. The desert sun beating down. The heat shimmering off stone walls. The order to move into the village. Intel said it was an insurgent stronghold, but the intel was wrong. There were fighters, yes, but also families, women, children. The firefight erupted before anyone could confirm. Bullets tore through homes. Screams pierced the dust. Thomas remembered dragging a boy no older than his daughter out from under a collapsed wall, his tiny body limp. He remembered the blood on his gloves, the metallic smell clogging his throat. And he remembered the order that came over comms. No survivors. Secure the zone. He woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. His hands shook as if still holding that broken body. He whispered into the darkness, God forgive me. Enter Rachel King, an investigative journalist with a reputation for chasing stories others feared. She arrived in Clearbrook with a single goal, to uncover the truth about Thomas Reed. Rachel wasn't interested in viral outrage. She wanted facts. And the deeper she dug, the more she sensed that Iron Dagger was the key. She tracked down Alvarez. She tracked down others who had served. Most shut their doors. One spoke, off record, about a mission that should never have happened. When she approached Thomas, he refused at first. "Some things are buried for a reason," he muttered. But Rachel's persistence wore him down. And for the first time, he spoke, not fully, not in detail, but enough. Enough to hint at a cover-up. Enough to suggest that the tragedy of Iron Dagger wasn't just soldiers caught in chaos, but orders given that were never meant to see daylight. 2 nights later, Rachel's rental car was vandalized. Tires slashed, windshield shattered, a note on the dashboard, "Stop digging, or else." She showed it to Captain Mercer. Mercer frowned. "This isn't just some crank. Somebody doesn't want this case open." The captain began connecting dots. The Army's silence, the colonel's warning, Alvarez's paranoia, and Thomas Reed at the center of it all, haunted not just by trauma, but by knowledge. Clearbrook was at war with itself. Vigils were held for Thomas, veterans saluting him, school children drawing thank you cards. At the same time, counter voices rose louder. "He's hiding something. He's not a hero, he's a killer." The courthouse steps turned into battlegrounds. Protesters with flags clashed with skeptics shouting about fake heroes. Thomas sat in his motel room, hearing it all through a cracked radio. His stomach twisted. He had wanted invisibility. Now he was a symbol. And symbols are dangerous, because they can be destroyed to send a message. Crowley tried to stay quiet, but reporters hounded him. One finally shoved a microphone in his face. "Do you regret mocking Thomas Reed now that he confirmed a decorated veteran?" Crowley snapped. "You don't know him like I do. None of you do. You think medals mean innocence? You think war doesn't make monsters." The clip went viral. Overnight, Crowley became the face of cold cynicism. Death threats piled up. His wife packed bags, taking the kids to her mother's. Crowley sat alone in his dark kitchen, realizing he had become the villain in a story he never intended to write. But part of him clung to a twisted belief. Maybe he was right. Maybe Reed wasn't the hero people wanted to believe. And if Iron Dagger came out, maybe the world would see it too. One evening, Alvarez returned. But this time, he wasn't alone. 2 men stood with him, hard, watchful, ex-military types with the look of enforcers. Thomas tensed. "What is this?" Alvarez's voice was grim. "They came to me. They know reporters are sniffing around. They want to make sure nothing comes out. And Tommy, they know you're the weak link." The tallest man stepped forward, his voice low but edged like steel. "You want to live out your days quietly? Then keep your mouth shut. Because if Iron Dagger leaks, you're not the only one who burns. Families burn. Friends burn. Entire careers burn." Thomas felt his breath choke. They weren't threatening just him. They were threatening everyone tied to him. Rachel King received an anonymous envelope slid under her motel door. Inside were photocopied documents, blurry, incomplete, but unmistakable. Fragments of a classified after-action report. Across the top, in bold letters, "Operation Iron Dagger. Eyes only." She scanned the pages. Coordinates. Casualty numbers. Orders stamped with signatures. And one line circled in red ink. "Reed witnessed. Suppressed details." Her pulse raced. This was it. The proof that something was buried. That Thomas Reed wasn't just a homeless veteran, but the reluctant keeper of a dark secret. But then she noticed something else. On the last page, scrawled in shaky handwriting, "They're watching. Trust no one. Hey." Rachel froze. "Hey, Alvarez?" Before she could think further, a knock rattled her door. Hard, urgent. "Rachel," a man's voice called. "Open up. We need to talk now." She crept toward the peephole. What she saw made her blood run cold. It wasn't Alvarez. It wasn't Captain Mercer. It wasn't anyone she recognized. It was one of the enforcers. The screen fades black. Rachel King stood frozen, her heart pounding like a drum in her throat. Through the peephole, the enforcer's pale eyes glared back at her. He knocked again, harder this time, the sound echoing through the thin motel walls. "Rachel," he growled, voice low and deliberate. "You don't want to make this worse. Open the door." Her mind raced. She had the envelope with the documents. Proof. If he got his hands on it, everything was gone. She backed away, scanning the room. No fire escape. One door. One window. She grabbed her laptop bag, stuffed the envelope inside, and cracked open the bathroom window. Hard hammering. She squeezed through, scraping her arm on the frame. She landed hard on the grass outside, knees jarring. Inside the room, the pounding grew louder. Then a crash, the door splintering. She didn't wait. She ran. At the same time, across town, Thomas Reed sat in the dim light of his motel room, staring at the floor. Alvarez had left hours earlier, leaving only warnings behind. Thomas couldn't shake the memory of the enforcer's words. Families burn. Friends burn. He thought of his daughter. He hadn't seen her in years. She lived with his ex-wife in another state. Would they really reach that far? Would they touch a child just to keep a secret buried? A knock at his own door jolted him. His body tensed, every instinct screaming danger. But when he opened it, it wasn't Alvarez or an enforcer. It was Captain Mercer. She stepped inside, eyes sharp, scanning the room. "We need to talk." Mercer laid out what she'd found. The colonel's warning. The redacted files. The vandalism of Rachel's car. "Someone's protecting Iron Dagger," she said, her voice tight. "And they're willing to intimidate, maybe worse, to keep it buried. But I need to know, Thomas, what really happened there." Thomas stared at her. His throat tightened. Images of the boy in the rubble. The order to secure the zone. The civilians caught in crossfire. All of it clawed at him. Finally, he rasped, "We weren't supposed to be there. The intel was wrong. But the brass didn't care. They wanted results. We engaged and innocents died. Too many." His voice cracked. "They told us to report 0 non-common casualties. They told us to lie. And when I refused, when I wrote the truth in my log, they buried it. Buried me." Mercer's stomach knotted. She had seen corruption, but this was deeper. "And Alvarez?" she asked. "He was there. He knows. But he's compromised." Rachel ran until her lungs burned. She didn't stop until she reached a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. She slipped into a booth, clutching her bag to her chest. Her hands shook as she opened her laptop. She scanned the documents again, her reporter's mind piecing together the fragments. Coordinates of village, casualty numbers blacked out, command orders signed by high-ranking officials. And the damning line, "Reed witnessed," suppressed details. She had gold, but she also had a target on her back. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We saw you run. We'll find you. Stop." Rachel swallowed hard. She wasn't paranoid anymore. She was hunted. Meanwhile, Jason Crowley sat in his darkened living room, a bottle of whiskey on the table, the TV flickering with another news segment about Thomas Reed. His career was in ruins. His family was gone. And still, people called Reed a hero. Crowley muttered to himself, "Hero? You think heroes end up in alleys begging for change? No, heroes don't break. Heroes don't." He cut himself off, slamming the bottle down. But deep inside, another thought burned. What if Reed wasn't a fraud? What if he was the truth? And what if Crowley's laughter had been the match that lit the fuse of something much bigger? The idea terrified him. And yet, he couldn't look away. Rachel contacted Mercer. They met in secret, at the back of the diner after hours. Rachel slid the envelope across the table. Mercer's eyes widened as she read. The documents were incomplete, but damning. "This is enough to trigger an inquiry," Mercer whispered. "If it's authentic." Rachel nodded. "And if it doesn't get me killed first." Mercer, clench your jaw. "Then we protect you. Both of you. Reed and you. But if what you're suggesting is true..." She leaned closer, voice barely audible. "We're not just talking about a bad op. We're talking about a cover-up that could reach the Pentagon." Rachel exhaled. She had known this story was big. But this was dangerous. Alvarez sat alone in his truck on the outskirts of town, chain-smoking cigarettes. His conscience was a battlefield. He had kept quiet for years, telling himself it was for survival. But seeing Thomas again, broken and discarded, clawed at him. They had both been there. They had both seen the same horrors. And now the enforcers, the very men sent to silence, were circling. He muttered to the empty cab, "How long can we run from the truth?" But his phone buzzed. A message from an unlisted number. Final warning. Control read. Or we will. Back at the motel, Thomas awoke to a noise outside his window. He crept to the blinds and peeked through. A black SUV idled across the street, engine humming, headlights off. He froze. Watched. Waited. After a long minute, the SUV pulled away, tires whispering against asphalt. Thomas's stomach dropped. He knew surveillance when he saw it. He was being watched. He whispered to himself, "It's happening again." Rachel decided to act. She booked a small podcast studio in town, planning to record a teaser, enough to get public attention before someone silenced her. She sat before the mic, the red light blinking. Her voice shook, but steadied as she spoke. Clearbrook thinks this is a story about a homeless veteran mocked by a careless cop. But it's more, much more. I have documents that suggest a U.S. military operation, Operation Iron Dagger, ended in civilian deaths, and that the Army buried the truth, silencing witnesses, including Sergeant Thomas Reed. This isn't just about dignity. This is about accountability at the highest levels. She stopped the recording, uploaded it to a cloud drive, prepared to hit publish. But just then, the studio door rattled. Someone was outside. Mercer received word of Rachel's attempted broadcast. She drove fast, sirens off, eyes scanning mirrors. If Rachel went public too soon, without ironclad evidence, they'd both be crushed. She arrived at the studio just as Rachel stumbled out the back, clutching her bag, terror in her eyes. "They found me again," Rachel gasped. Mercer gripped her shoulder. "We move together from now on. No more lone wolf. You understand?" Rachel nodded, trembling. Thomas found Alvarez waiting for him again. But this time, Alvarez looked different, tired, guilty, torn. "They want me to shut you down," Alvarez admitted. "But Tommy, I can't. Not after what we lived through. Not after what it cost us." Thomas's eyes burned. "Then stand with me. Tell the truth. For once in our lives, tell the truth." Alvarez shook his head, anguish twisting his features. "If we do, we're dead men walking." Thomas stepped closer. "We've been dead inside for years." That night, Rachel received another anonymous envelope, but this one wasn't documents. It was a photograph. A photograph of Thomas, taken just hours earlier, standing outside his motel. On the back, scrawled in red ink, "Next time he doesn't walk away." Rachel's stomach turned. This wasn't just surveillance. This was a warning of execution. She rushed to Mercer. Mercer's face hardened. "They're escalating. We need protection detail now. But if they're this bold, they're not just local muscle. This is coordinated." Rachel whispered, "How high does this go?" Crowley couldn't sleep. He watched the news, the protests, the whispers of Iron Dagger. Something inside him cracked. He drove to Thomas's motel, stood outside the door, fist raised a knock, hesitated. What would he say? "Sorry I laughed at you while your life crumbled?" Would that mean anything? Before he could decide, headlights swept across the lot. Another SUV. He ducked into the shadows, heart racing. Through the tinted windows, he saw them. The enforcers. They weren't here to talk. Inside the motel, Thomas heard the SUV pull up. He rose slowly, muscles tense, a sick familiarity coursing through him. He moved to the window, pulled back the curtain, and froze. The enforcers were here. At the same moment, Rachel's phone buzzed with a new text. "It ends tonight. Stay away from Reed." Rachel's blood ran cold. She looked up at Mercer. "They're going after him." Mercer grabbed her keys. "Then we move now." But by the time they reached the motel, the SUV's doors were already open. Figures stepped out, shadows stretching on the flickering lot lights. And Thomas Reed stood at the window, staring down at the men sent to erase him once and for all. The screen fades to black. The motel lot was quiet except for the low hum of the SUV's engine. Its headlights flared once, then cut out. The night thickened. Thomas Reed stood at the window, every nerve in his body alive. He recognized the posture of the men stepping out. Controlled, deliberate, the same predatory gait he had seen in far-off war zones. They weren't drunks. They weren't petty thugs. They were professionals. He muttered under his breath, "So it begins." He reached into the drawer by the bed. His hands closed around the only weapon he had, not a gun, but a rusted combat knife he'd carried since Afghanistan. The steel was dull, but the memories were sharp. In the shadows near the vending machine, Officer Jason Crowley crouched, watching the enforcers. His heart pounded, breath shallow. He hadn't planned this. He had driven here to say something to Reed, maybe even to apologize, but now he saw something far darker. The men moved with lethal intent, their hands brushing beneath their jackets. Crowley's training screamed at him. They're armed. They're here for blood. And suddenly, the laughter that had once come so easily to him seemed grotesque. The man he mocked was about to die, and Crowley might be the only one who could stop it. Rachel gripped the dashboard as Captain Mercer tore through the streets, siren dark, engine roaring. "They said it ends tonight," Rachel panted. "They're going to kill him." Mercer's jaw was stone. "Not if we get there first." The radio crackled with static. Mercer had called for backup, but the dispatcher's voice came through tense. "All units tied up. ETA unknown." Mercer cursed under her breath. They were on their own. The enforcers fanned out. One circled toward the back of the motel. Another approached the stairwell, while the tallest man strode straight toward Thomas's door. Thomas's breath slowed. Training took over. He presses back the wall, knife in hand, heart pounding not with fear, but with grim readiness. The door handle rattled. Then came the crack of a boot splintering wood. The door burst inward. Thomas moved. The knife flashed in the dim light. Thomas lunged, catching the first enforcer by surprise, slashing across his arm. The man grunted, gun clattering to the carpet. Another figure appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn. Thomas dove for cover as a shot rang out, shattering the motel mirror into a rain of glass. The years melted away. He wasn't in a dingy motel anymore. He was back in Afghanistan, surrounded, outnumbered, fighting to survive. But this time, the war had followed him home. From the shadows, Crowley drew his service pistol. His hands trembled, but his aim was steady. He fired once, striking the second enforcer's shoulder. The man staggered, dropping his weapon. "Police! Drop it!" Crowley shouted, voice cracking with adrenaline. For a heartbeat, Thomas froze, knife poised, eyes locking on the man who had mocked him days earlier. Crowley barked again, "Behind you!" Thomas turned just in time to deflect another blow, the knife slicing across an attacker's vest. For the first time, Reed and Crowley weren't adversaries. They were allies. The squad car screeched into the lot, Mercer leaping out, weapon drawn. Rachel stumbled behind her, clutching her bag. "Freeze!" Mercer shouted at the chaos unfolding. "Hands where I can see them." But the enforcers weren't amateurs. One fired at Mercer, forcing her to dive behind her car. Another bolted toward the SUV, shouting, "Abort!" The firefight was short, brutal, and loud. Bullets tore into motel walls. Windows shattered. The lot lit up with muzzle flashes. Rachel crouched low, heart in her throat, watching history collide. A disgraced cop, a haunted soldier, and faceless men trying to bury the truth. Just as the enforcers began retreating, another truck roared into the lot. Its headlights cut across the scene. The driver's door flew open. It was Alvarez. He jumped out, pistol in hand, firing two precise shots that sent the fleeing SUV skidding as its tires blew. Sparks screamed against asphalt. The enforcers scrambled inside, dragging their wounded, and the SUV roared off into the night on shredded rubber. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of a cracked radiator. Thomas lowered his knife, chest heaving. Crowley lowered his pistol, sweat dripping down his brow. Mercer kept her weapon trained on the distance, unwilling to believe it was over. And Alvarez stood there, breathing hard, eyes burning with conflict. "You weren't supposed to fight back," he muttered. "Now it's war." Police sirens wailed in the distance, finally responding. But by the time more units arrived, the enforcers were gone. The motel was wrecked. Doors splintered. Windows blown out. Blood smeared across faded carpet. Reporters swarmed within hours. Camera flashes lit up the lot as Thomas was led into an ambulance, his face streaked with sweat and glass cuts. Rachel clutched her bag tight. The documents felt heavier than ever. She knew now this wasn't speculation. This was deadly truth. Mercer ordered her men to lock down the scene, but her gut told her something chilling. The firefight wasn't a climax. It was a warning shot. At the station, Crowley sat in an interrogation room, hands shaking as he replayed the night. He had saved Reed's life, maybe even redeemed himself in some small way. But he also knew what he'd seen. Professional killers, military precision, not just some gang. His chief entered, face pale. "Jason, you're on indefinite leave. The press has your face on every channel. But off the record, you did good tonight." Crowley barely heard. His mind was fixed on Thomas Reed, the man he laughed at, the man who just fought like a soldier possessed. And deep down, Crowley knew this wasn't over. He whispered to himself, "What the hell have I stepped into?" Back at her motel, Rachel stared at her laptop screen. The file she recorded earlier blinked, waiting to be uploaded. One click, and the world would know. But if she did, Thomas could die. Alvarez could die. Mercer could lose her badge. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. The weight of responsibility pressed down. She had chased big stories before, but never one that left bodies bleeding in a parking lot. Her phone buzzed. A new message from the unknown number. Last warning. Publish and you die. Rachel closed her laptop with trembling hands. She wasn't sure anymore if truth was worth the cost. In the hospital, Thomas lay hooked IVs, his eyes hollow but alert. Mercer sat beside him, recorder in hand. "You need to put on record," she urged. "Now, before they silence you for good." Thomas turned his head, staring at the ceiling tiles. Slowly, he began to speak. Operation Iron Dagger wasn't supposed to happen. The village was misidentified. We went in heavy, thinking it was an enemy compound. It wasn't. We were ordered to secure it anyway. When civilians were killed, they told us to erase it, to call them combatants. I refused. Alvarez refused. His voice broke. They destroyed us for it. Mercer leaned forward. Who gave the order? Thomas's lips parted. The name hovered, dangerous, on his tongue. But before he could speak, the lights flickered, then went out. Emergency generators hummed, but the silence was sharp. Nurses rushed down hallways, confused. Mercer's instinct screamed. She stood, weapon drawn, eyes scanning the dark. Then came the sound of boots on tile. Heavy, coordinated. The enforcers had returned. Alvarez appeared in the doorway, gun raised, eyes wide. "They're here," he hissed. "We have to move. Now." Mercer glared at him. "How did you know?" Alvarez didn't answer. His silence was damning. Thomas struggled to sit up, pain racking his body. "You sold us out." Alvarez's face twisted with shame. "I warned you. I tried to protect you. But they're bigger than both of us. If you speak, we're all dead." The sound of boots grew louder, closer. Rachel burst into the room, breathless, clutching her laptop. "They're inside. We have to go." Mercer raised her pistol. Alvarez raised his, and Thomas clutched his knife as the first shadows appeared in the hallway. The enforcers closed in, weapons ready, their leader's voice echoing through the dark. "End it here. No survivors." Rachel's scream cut through the silence. And then a gunshot. The scene freezes. The sound hangs in the air. But who fired? And who fell? The gunshot echoed to the hospital ward like thunder. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Rachel clutched her laptop to her chest, her scream still hanging in the air. Mercer spun toward the doorway, pistol raised. Alvarez staggered back, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. One of the enforcers stepped into view, weapon still smoking. His eyes were flat, his expression unshaken. "End this," he growled. The hallway erupted. Mercer fired first, her rounds tearing into the doorway. forcing the enforcer to duck. Alvarez, despite his wound, returned fire, teeth clenched. Thomas struggled out of bed, IVs ripping from his arm. Pain lanced through him, but adrenaline took over. He grabbed the combat knife from the tray, staggering toward the door. Rachel ducked under a table, heart slamming. The laptop dug into her ribs, a reminder. This is why they're here. This is why they'll kill us all. Bullets chewed through ceiling tiles. Nurses screamed in the distance. The hospital was no longer a sanctuary. It was a war zone. Officer Crowley had been sitting in his patrol car outside the hospital, ordered to stay away from Reed after the motel incident. But when the power cut out, he felt the dread. When the gunshots rang, he knew. He ran inside, pistol drawn, against every command. He followed the sound of chaos, rounding a corner just in time to see Mercer and Alvarez exchanging fire with shadows in the hall. Crowley froze. He could run. He could save himself. Instead, he charged. Thomas hit the first enforcer like a storm. His knife drove into the man's vest, slashing deep enough to stagger him. The enforcer swung his rifle like a club, cracking Thomas across the jaw. Thomas tasted blood, but didn't stop. He had lived too long as a ghost, ashamed, broken. Tonight, he was a soldier again. He roared as he drove the knife into the man's leg. The enforcer collapsed, weapon clattering. Mercer shouted, "Reed! Down!" Thomas dropped his bullets, hissed over him. Mercer's aim precise and merciless. Rachel crawled toward the side door, clutching the laptop like a newborn. Every instinct screamed to flee, but she couldn't leave Thomas, Mercer, or even Crowley. Still, she knew, if they all died here, Iron Dagger's truth died too. She whispered to herself, "Survive, publish later. Survive first." Her fingers closed on the fire alarm handle. She yanked. The alarm screamed to life. Sprinklers burst overhead. Water rained down, turning the chaos into a strobe-lit nightmare of smoke, bullets, and spray. Alvarez leaned against the wall, blood streaming from his shoulder, vision swimming. He fired blindly, then slumped. Thomas crawled to him, dragging him behind cover. "You sold us out," Thomas spat, fury in his eyes. Alvarez coughed, voice raw. "I tried to protect you. They own everything. I thought if I played along, I could keep you alive." Thomas's grip tightened on his knife. Rage burned, but then he saw Alvarez's face, pale, broken, desperate. Thomas whispered, "Then prove it. Fight with me now." Alvarez's trembling hand tightened on his pistol. He nodded. Crowley burst into the room, weapon barking. He hit one enforcer in the chest, sending him sprawling. Another swung to fire, but Crowley tackled him, fist hammering, rage pouring out like years of guilt unleashed. "Not tonight," he roared. "Not again." Thomas stared in disbelief. The same officer who had once laughed at his misery was now fighting like a man possessed to save him. For the first time, Thomas saw Crowley not as an enemy, but as another broken man clawing for redemption. The enforcers regrouped, dragging their fallen. Their leader's voice boomed over the alarm. "Abort! Too much heat!" They retreated into the smoke, vanishing as fast as they come. The hospital floor was a ruin, blood, water, glass, and silence broken only by alarms. Mercer lowered her weapon, chest heaving. Crowley leaned against the wall, knuckles raw. Alvarez slumped, barely conscious. And Thomas Reed stood in the wreckage, knife dripping, chest heaving, eyes burning. He wasn't invisible anymore. By dawn, the hospital was a fortress of flashing lights. Reporters swarmed, helicopters buzzed, federal suits and dark cars prowled a lot. The official statement, gang-related violence. The reality, a silencing attempt by forces too powerful to name. Rachel watched from the sidelines, laptop still safe. Her hands shook as she typed notes. She knew now, publishing the story wasn't just journalism. It was war. Mercer confronted the feds, demanding protection for Reed. They brushed her off with polished smiles. "You've done enough, Captain. Step aside." Her jaw tightened. Not a chance. That evening, Thomas finally spoke the name he had held back. In Mercer's office, with Rachel recording and Crowley watching, he whispered, General Nathan Kincaid. He signed the orders. He buried the truth. He owns Iron Dagger's ghosts. Rachel froze. She knew the name, a decorated general, now retired, rumored to be advising defense contractors. A man untouchable. Crowley muttered, "If that name's real, we're screwed." Mercer's face hardened. "If that name's real, we just declared war on someone who doesn't lose." That night, Rachel returned to her motel. Another envelope waited under the door. Inside was a single photograph. Her, standing outside Mercer's office. On the back, "Next time it's you?" Rachel's hand shook. She sank to the floor, sobbing. She had wanted a story. Now she was prey. Alvarez lay in a hospital bed under guard. Mercer visited him. "You want to make this right?" she asked. His eyes were tired. "They'll kill me before I testify." "Then die with honor," she said. "Not shame." He turned his face away, tears mixing with sweat. For the first time, he looked like the soldier he used to be. Crowley sat alone in his empty house. His wife hadn't returned. His badge was suspended. But for the first time, he felt clarity. He had mocked a man he didn't understand. Now he had bled beside him. He whispered into the silence, "Maybe there's still a way back." Then he loaded his pistol, because he knew the fight wasn't over. Rachel finally hit publish. The recording went live. Her podcast episode exploded online, clips spreading like wildfire. Operation Iron Dagger was a cover-up. General Nathan Kincaid signed the orders. Civilians died. And Sergeant Thomas Reed was silenced for telling the truth. The internet ignited, but so did the danger. As Rachel packed to leave town, her phone buzzed with a new message. No threats this time, just a video file. She clicked. The footage showed a desert village, smoke rising, bodies in the dust, soldiers shouting, gunfire, and in the middle of the chaos, a younger Thomas Reed, dragging a wounded child from rubble. Her breath caught. This was the proof, the undeniable evidence. But then the camera panned. Another figure appeared. General Nathan Kincaid himself, barking orders. Rachel's blood turned to ice. The screen cut to black, replaced with text. "Part of the truth. The rest will cost you." She dropped the phone, trembling. Whoever sent this wasn't protecting her. They were playing her. And Thomas Reed's war was only beginning. Rachel didn't sleep. By sunrise, her recording had detonated across social feeds. Clips of the hospital chaos, quotes from Mercer about non-local professionals, and the name that turned a local scandal into a national one, General Nathan Kincaid. Cable anchors wore their most solemn faces. Former Pentagon spokespeople adjusted their ties and chose careful phrases. Think peace headlines sprouted like weeds. What was Iron Dagger? The price of silence. Are our heroes being broken on purpose? But the video file, the shaky, scorching footage of a younger Thomas Reed hauling a child out a collapsing wall while men in U.S. uniforms barked orders, was a match that set the tinder ablaze. Rachel played again and again, then paused on the keyframe. A rigid man with a posture of command, dust griming his jawline, mouth forming an order with that clipped authority the rank and file never forget. Kincaid. Rachel sent the stills to 3 separate cloud drives, then to an international journalist she trusted. Her phone began to ring every 90 seconds. She let it. Her hands were steady. Her lungs were not. Part of the truth, the anonymous sender wrote. The rest will cost you. Cost her what? Her source? Her life? Or someone else's? The answer came faster than she expected. They didn't flash badges. They didn't need to. 2 men in strategic gray suits knocked and stepped inside the borrowed office where Rachel had set up, polite, crisp, quietly terrifying. "Ms. King," the taller one said, "we're here to help." Rachel kept her laptop closed. With safety, clarity, the public interest. He smiled like a dentist. We both want the truth. But unredacted battlefield footage compromises ongoing operations and sources. If you give us your copies, we can verify authenticity, move this through the proper channels, and protect all involved. Like you protected Reed? Rachel asked. That soft smile dimmed. The second man took a careful step nearer. You're in danger. So is your source. And so is your subject. You can't stop what's coming by yourself. Rachel nodded, as if considering. Then bring me a federal subpoena with a judge's signature and a written personal protection plan for Reed and Alvarez. In the meantime, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. They're in your building. Back stairwell. Leave now. Rachel looked up and smiled brightly at the suits. In the meantime, she said, you can leave. They did not smile back. But they did leave. Rachel exhaled. Then she ran. Captain Mercer had 40 hours of broken sleep across 4 days and moved like she was carved from wire. She lodged a formal request with the state for protective custody for Reed and Alvarez and received a form letter that said, essentially, no. Then her inbox coughed up a memo from federal liaison recommending that Clearbrook police restrain the ongoing proliferation of unsubstantiated allegations which may harm national security. She cursed. Then she called in her 2 most trusted detectives and closed the office door. In-house only, she said. Phones off. If there's a leak, it's above our pay grade or sitting in this building. We move Reed tonight. We don't tell dispatch until we're already en route. Where to? Detective Yates asked. St. Luke's church basement, Mercer said. Father Donnelly owes me and knows how to keep a secret. Alvarez? The other detective asked. Mercer hesitated. Alvarez had helped save them at the motel. Alvarez had also brought the wolves to their door. He comes, she said. Tight leash. They nodded. No one asked about Kincaid. The name felt like a loaded weapon on the table. Visible, heavy, untouchable. Crowley stared at the box. His life was inside. Badge sidearm. A coffee mug with a chipped rim. 6 complaint forms with his name on them. 1 commendation he barely remembered earning. He was still suspended. But in the chaotic aftermath of the hospital attack, Mercer hadn't escorted him from the building. Maybe she didn't have time. Maybe she was making a point. He slid the badge case open. The metal felt colder than it used to. He remembered the burst of shame from that day on Main Street, when he laughed at Reed, and the world laughed at him. He remembered the fear in the hospital that he wouldn't be enough to stop the men who came to kill the man he'd mocked. He closed the badge case and stood. If he couldn't wear the uniform, he would still do the job. He texted Mercer, I'm in. Whatever you need. Her reply came 2 minutes later. Back entrance. 1900 hours. No chatter. He smiled, grim, surprised at the relief in his chest. Then he went to find body armor he wasn't supposed to have. Thomas hobbled down the hospital corridor with a cane and a stubborn scowl. Pain stitched across his ribs. His jaw was a thundercloud of bruises. The nurse tisk-tissed. Thomas didn't waste apologies on her or anyone else. He saved his breath for moving forward. Rachel met him at the exit. You shouldn't be here, he said with a trace of humor. You attract trouble. Rachel's smile was brief. You're welcome. They sat in Mercer's unmarked sedan while the sun slid down Clearbrook's water tower. Rachel cued the video on a burner tablet and turned it to him. He watched himself in another life, another body, hauling a child from choking dust while rounds cracked the sky. He watched the lens swing and lock on a hard face and iron jaw. Kincaid. He heard orders that were both familiar and unbearable. Then the clip cut. 2 seconds early. If there were names shouted next, if there were decisions and replies, the sender had trimmed them away. Part of the truth, Thomas said softly. They're not just threatening us. They're editing history. Rachel swallowed. I think someone inside wants us out. Slowly. On their terms. Thomas lifted his eyes. They were steadier than she expected. Then we make it ours. Night fell like a lid. Mercer drove herself. No patrol unit. No lights. Crowley sat passenger side, keeping low. Thomas was in back. Blanket over his lap. A plain duffel at his feet. Behind them, a second car held Alvarez and Detective Yates, who looked like he'd rather fight a bear than ride with a man who'd once fed a hit team their location. No sirens, Mercer said. We get there clean, or we don't get there at all. They cut through side streets, past darkened storefronts, past Mel's Diner with its blank neon stare. Rain spit across the windshield. The wipers kept time like a metronome winding down. Crowley scanned the mirrors. "We've got a tail," he murmured. 2 cars back. Dark sedan. Mercer didn't look. But of course. She drifted another right, then another, mapping a box, watching if the sedan stuck. It did. "Yates!" Mercer said into the walkie. "We got company." Yates cursed softly. "Copy." "Split," Mercer said. "Take the river road. We'll cut across the tracks." "Copy," Yates said. The second car peeled away. The dark sedan hesitated, then followed Mercer. "Good," she said, voice flat. "They picked the wrong box." Crowley smiled without joy. "Says you." The church basement smelled like laundry soap and old varnish. Father Donnelly met them at the side door in rolled shirt sleeves, keys jangling like he'd run the length of the nave. "You owe me 2 doors and a quiet conscience," he said to Mercer. "You'll get one of those," she said. "The doors, if you're lucky." Thomas shook the priest's hand. Donnelly's grip was warm and unflinching, his eyes the steady gray of a Midwestern sky before a storm. "You're safe here," he said. "For the moment." Rachel arrived a heartbeat later through a different entrance, guided by Yates, who hadn't lost a tail after all. He'd traded. 2 sedans now orbited the church like sharks. "We're boxed," Crowley said, peeking through a slatted window. Mercer nodded once. "Then we hold, and we plan." They spread on folding chairs around a long table meant for casseroles and bingo cards. Rachel opened her laptop. Thomas watched with his hands knotted together under the table. Alvarez sat apart, as if distance could absolve him, as if the wall could catch the bullets meant for his chest. "Whoever sent the footage has more," Rachel said. "This felt like a test. I've burned 3 dead man switch drives, but the source is inside. They'll need extraction, not ethics." Alvarez's head lifted. Inside where? Rachel's phone lit. Nice sanctuary. Ducked above the coffee maker. The number was different. The tone was the same. Clinical, intimate, 1 step ahead. Crowley rose and reached into the duct. His fingers found a thin envelope. Inside, a thumb drive and a single sheet of paper. The sheet listed 4 names. No ranks. No titles. Just surnames with first initials and a 5th line typed in a font that looked like it had been chosen to be forgettable. "St. Luke's basement is not safe. You have a leak." "Hey!" Rachel's stomach fell. "Alvarez?" she said without thinking, and then regretted it. Alvarez went white. "I didn't. This isn't me. I could be anyone. I could be..." "Alvarez," Thomas said softly. "Stop." Mercer scanned the note again. "Either someone wants us to kill each other," she said, "or we have a mole." She looked around the table, one by one, and we do not have time to figure out which from first principles. Crowley slid the thumb drive into Rachel's laptop. Folders blossomed. After underscore action, rover underscore feeds, Sigint, payroll underscore adjustments, and a last folder with single name, Kincaid. No passwords. No encryption. It felt like a dare. Rachel clicked after underscore action. A PDF open, most of it black bars, but in the middle, a paragraph they hadn't seen before, a paragraph that was not supposed to exist. Engagement occurred under ROE Delta. Civilian movement assessed as shadow combatants by command override. Captain O underscore 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 objected. SFC read corroborated. Override sustained. General Kincaid. Thomas made a sound like a punch swallowed. Alvarez stared like he'd been handed a compass to a country he didn't want to visit. "They wrote it down," he whispered, "and then they buried it." Rachel clicked Kincaid. 2 files, a black and white headshot, and a memo. The memo was short. Read. Mitigate. No verbs. No dates. 2 words that tasted like chloroform. The basement lights flickered. Then they went out. Crowley's flashlight snapped on. Mercer's did not. Swatted off by a gloved hand that came from the dark like a magician's trick. The door at the top of the basement stairs swung open, then slammed. A hollow thud shook the wall. Someone had just shouldered the backfire exit. "Positions!" Mercer barked. Rachel slid under the table with a laptop, cradling the drive like a bird with a broken wing. The screen cast a soft ghost light that painted their faces into masks. Thomas's hand found the old knife. Bullets didn't scare him. Darkness did not either. Burying the truth did. Feet on the stairs, 1, 2, 3 sets, then 4. Professional cadence. Not rushing. Not hurrying. Hunters. Captain, Crowley breathed. Your call. Mercer inhaled. We talk first, she said. We shoot if they keep speaking. The first man rounded the landing, night vision goggles gleaming like insect eyes. We're here for Reed, he said, voice disembodied by a comms throat mic. And for the drive, surrender both and walk away. Not tonight, Mercer said. Not ever. A beat. Then this ends as it has to, the voice replied. The second set of footsteps halted. The third shifted. The fourth did not. Thomas heard the fourth man breathing. It was ragged, almost human again. A memory tugged. A voice on a range long ago. A laugh at a joke about MREs. A scar that ran from ear to jaw. Alvarez, he whispered into the dark. The fourth figure flinched. Mercer's head snapped. Rachel looked up from under the table, heart slamming like a cabinet door in a hurricane. The third figure took that heartbeat to leap. The smoke bomb hit the tile and bloomed with a hiss. Father Donnelly's posters on the wall, St. Michael, defend us, vanished into milk. Someone coughed. Someone fired. Someone fell. Crowley moved blind and low, counting paces, remembering where the table edge bit his thigh. He reached the far wall and found the breaker box by feel, then swore when his fingers met a padlock that hadn't been there an hour before. Mercer's first shot cracked the smoke. A body thudded. The second shot ricocheted, biting plaster. Voices tightened in the fog. Left, down. Boots skidded, corrected. A hand ghosted past Rachel's ankle like a shark fin and vanished before she could scream. Thomas used the smoke like weather. He moved when the air shifted, when a silhouette broke a gray line with black. He caught the nearest attacker at the wrist, wrenched it, heard a gun hit tile, drove the knife hilt into ribs, twice, 3 times. The man folded. Thomas didn't let him hit the ground gently. He took his comms mic and crushed it under his heel. Alvarez, Thomas said again, if you're in that stairwell and you walk down here with them, I swear to God. A voice broke from the fog, raw. I'm not. I'm a cough. I'm with you. The smoke shifted. A shadow on the stairs swore and fired. A chunk of Donnelly's coffee urn exploded into chrome shrapnel and blessed steam. Father Donnelly, somewhere behind the furnace, prayed in Latin, voice steady. Something inside Rachel that had been rattling since the motel fell quiet. Hold, Mercer said. Hold. And then a voice above them, not a comms rasp, a microphone plugged into the church PA. Enough, it said. The timbre was command, the cadence surgical. Captain Mercer, Miss King, Sergeant Reed, you have something that belongs to the United States. You will place it on the table and step away. Rachel's skin prickled. The voice was older than the men in the smoke. It lived higher. Mercer lifted her chin toward the ceiling speaker. General Kincaid, she said, each syllable a nail. I presume. A pause that pretended to be surprise. Then, warm as a gun barrel left in the sun. Presume what you like, but you won't leave this basement with that drive. Rachel slid the laptop closer to her chest. Thomas stepped between her and the stairs without thinking. Kincaid's voice softened. Sergeant Reed, you once understood orders. Understand this. You cannot carry the weight of a war on your back through a church basement. Thomas stared at the smoke at the speaker grill. His mouth was a hard line. Watch me. The fourth figure finally moved into the room, gun lowered, empty left hand raised. Alvarez's face emerged like a ship out of fog. Pale, jaw bristled, eyes red. He kicked a fallen night vision rig toward Mercer, then set his pistol on the floor and shoved it forward with his boot. I can't stop them, he said, voice knife thin, but I can map them. 2 at the stairs, 1 left pillar, 1 right near the boiler. There's a 5th outside the side door. He's the insurance policy. Insurance for what? Crowley asked. For you to do the rational thing. Kincaid's voice answered from above, amused. For once. General, Mercer called. You're already on tape ordering an override. The only thing that keeps this contained is my people leaving here alive. You snuff an officer, a journalist, and a Silver Star recipient in a church? You don't contain a fire, you build a lighthouse. A beat, then a chuckle. You misunderstand the weather. Rachel typed blind under the table, fingers finding muscle memory. Split a file, package fragments, seed multiple mirrors, set triggers. She created a folder called St. Michael Drop and stacked it with enough to ruin, or at least rattle men accustomed to being untouchable. Thomas touched her shoulder with his fingertips, a soldier's way of saying we're here. In the fog, it felt like a promise. Last offer, Kincaid said, the drive, and Reed comes with us. We put a lid on this. We write him a story you can live with. You already wrote me one, Thomas said. I didn't survive it. Mercer did the only thing she could do when outgunned, outflanked, and possibly outnumbered. She got weird. Father, she called into the steam and smoke. Does the youth group still run their scavenger hunt with the fire doors? A beat, then from behind the furnace. It does. And St. Luke still likes an underdog. Mercer grinned. Crowley on me. She set her flashlight on the floor and rolled it toward the stairs like a bowling ball. A salvo of suppressed shots clawed tile and lit brief teeth in the smoke. While the shooters chewed flashlight, Mercer and Crowley stood and moved left, quiet as guilt. Reed, she hissed. When I say run, you run. King behind him. Alvarez, God help me. Bring up the rear. Alvarez nodded, jaw set. He slipped a brass key into Mercer's palm, as if it were a confession. Side door. Truth. Kincaid's voice grew bored. 3 seconds. Rachel's screen chimed softly. St. Michael Drop finished seating. She hit one more command. If offline, then publish. She lifted the laptop with both hands. 2, said Kincaid. Mercer kicked the folding table into the stairwell with a metallic shriek. 1, he said. Run. Mercer breathed. They sprinted through smoke and scripture, past the boiler, through a fuse box hallway painted the color of old sermons. Crowley shouldered a fire door. It flew inward to a narrow stair that rose into a dark little sacristy smelling like candle wax and spilled wine. Behind them, shots stitched the wall. Father Donnelly's voice did not waver. They hit the sacristy, then a corridor, then a door into the sanctuary, an enormous black volume where stained glass at night becomes a map of the mind. Their steps thumped along the nave like hearts. Mercer aimed them to a side exit. Crowley through the crash bar. The side door enforcer swung in from the shadows, arm rising. Thomas didn't think. He hit the man with the old knife and a new purpose. The blade met flesh, then stopped against a vest plate. Thomas pivoted, slamming the man's head into a marble column. He dropped as if someone had finally told him a secret. They burst into the rain, into the floodlights of cruisers that weren't theirs. For black SUVs idle at the curb like commas in a sentence that ends in a period. Men stepped out. Not tactical gear. Suits. The kind that hide pistols better than they hide intentions. Stop. One called. Voice amplified. Hands up in a calming pantomime that made every nerve rise. We're federal. Stand down. Seal them. Came Kincaid's voice, now from an earpiece on one's suits. Enough. Mercer's grin was all teeth. St. Luke likes an underdog, she said, and hit the key Alvarez had slipped into her hand into a little brass lock set into an iron post. Some old churches are built with a mischievous architect's heart. Fire doors clanged shut along the block. Ancient neighborhood floodgates Father Donnelly had never removed. The SUVs found themselves barricaded by rising iron arms that thudded into place like a last amen. Go! Mercer shouted. They ran, not away from the church, but sideways into a cut between brick buildings that most people forgot existed. Rain turned the alley slick. Somewhere in the PA a hymn started, recorded in tinny, "Be not afraid." For 3 blocks, they did not look back. The safe house was a second-floor storage loft over an upholstery shop that smelled like glue and quiet failure. Yates met them there with breath that said he'd run the long way. Phone's in the sink, Mercer said. Battery's out. If it has a chip, it goes to sleep. Rachel set the laptop on a packing table, heart still drumming. She opened ST Microdrop to confirm the seed. It winked green, armed, not detonated. Thomas stood beside a narrow window and watched the rain. He did not speak. Alvarez leaned against a wall, pale beneath old fluorescent tubes. Crowley stood in the doorway, the muzzle of his pistol as steady as he could make it. Mercer took a breath to speak. Then the light in the loft blinked once. A voice drifted up from the stairs. Amiable practice, the kind that closes deals in wars. Captain Mercer, it said, you make an evening interesting. They all turned their guns toward the stairwell. Kincaid walked up alone. No soldiers, no suits, no pretenses. He wore an overcoat and a look of mild disappointment, as if they'd overcooked the roast. He stopped at the top, eyes flicking across their faces, weighing each. Guns down, he said calmly. Please, I'm not carrying. If I wanted you dead, you would be. Mercer didn't lower hers. Then you came to watch. Came to talk, he said. Ms. King, Sergeant, Officer. He nodded at Crowley. And Mr. Alvarez, always half a step on the wrong foot. Alvarez swallowed. Kincaid folded his hands as if about to say grace. You have a narrative and some files. You do not have context. Iron Dagger was a mess. Yes, war is a mess. Rules of engagement flex in real time when a village hides a cell that directs mortar fire at a base where American kids sleep. That's not a metaphor. They were children, some of them. Not the ones you shot, Thomas said, the control in his voice scarier than a shout. Kincaid looked at him with an odd sadness. You carried a child out. I saw the tape. You were brave, Sergeant. You were also wrong about who we were facing. Then why bear the report? Rachel asked. Because we were already running hot. Kincaid said. Because one incident would be used to break an operation that was saving lives. Because sometimes history is heavier than the truth can hold for a while. I try to hold it. That's my sin. Your memo said read. Mitigate, Mercer said. That's not a prayer, General. Kincaid's eyes flicked. A poor choice of verb from a poor moment. I wanted him safe. Quiet is safe. You sent men to kill him, Crowley said. If I had, Kincaid said, you would not be in this room. Silence gathered like fog. Kincaid took a careful step forward. Give me the drive. Let me move it where it can matter. I will get Reed in front of the right committee. Under protection. With counsel. You do this through podcasts and basements. You'll wind up a headline and a memorial. You do it through channels, you might get change. How many bodies have you built those channels on? Rachel asked. Kincaid did not answer. His eyes went to Thomas. Sergeant, there's a path that doesn't end with blood. Thomas stared at him for a long time. I believe that once, he said. Then a boy bled out of my arms. Kincaid's jaw flexed, the first crack in the marble. The boy was the son of an ISIS facilitator, he said. You know that. No, Thomas said, voice hollow. I just knew he was a boy. Rachel's laptop chimed. Everyone looked at it. ST Microdrop blinked from arm to publishing. I didn't touch it, Rachel said, stunned. The trigger? Failsafe, Mercer said quietly. The second they jammed the church power, you told the truth what to do. Kincaid's eyes didn't leave the screen. Turn it off. I can't, Rachel said. It's already live. Kincaid's face went still. Then the stairwell groaned. Not from a person. From a fire. Heat licked the doorway below. Someone had lit the upholstery shop. Kincaid's head whipped toward the smoke. Idiots! He hissed, not at them, but at his own ghosts. He stripped off his coat and thrust it into Thomas's hands. Down the back ladder, he said, suddenly all soldier, no statesman. Now, go. Come with us, Mercer said, half against her will. Kincaid shook his head. Someone has to move the cars. He smiled, bleak and genuine in the same heartbeat. I am old enough to choose the fire I walk through. Smoke swelled into the room like a mouth opening. They ran for the back. Kincaid didn't follow. Rain turned the alley into a cold curtain. Mercer shoved up the back window. Crowley hauled Alvarez through it like contraband. Rachel handed the laptop to Thomas and climbed after it, landing in wet grit. Sirens were already flavoring the night. Police, fire, maybe worse. They dropped into the alley and ran. Half a block away, a black panel van cut its engine and opened its side door. No lights, no plates, no words. Don't. Mercer snapped, pivoting to go the other way. The other way held two sedans that hadn't been there a minute earlier. Rachel's phone vibrated in her pocket. She froze, pulled it free. A new message bloomed on the lock screen, with a sender she now recognized by the absence of a name. This is a full archive, but you have to choose. Get read out now and lose the upload, or finish the upload and lose read. Two buttons glowed beneath the text. Pull and push. Rain ticked on the glass like a clock. Thomas looked at Rachel, then at Mercer, then at Crowley. Alvarez swayed, pale as a moon. Sirens howled closer. The van door yawned. The sedans inched. Rachel's thumb trembled over pull. "Don't you dare," Mercer breathed. "We're not trading his life for file." Rachel closed her eyes. In the darkness, she saw a dusty village and a boy and a man with a knife and a priest praying in Latin while smoke rolled like weather. She opened her eyes. The screen waited. Two choices, one world. Pull or push. Thomas said quietly, "Choose the truth." Rachel's thumb moved. The moment her skin touched glass, a hand snatched the phone from behind. A cold voice in her ear said, "I'll choose for you." The screen flashed. The rain swallowed the alley. And somewhere above them, on a roofline lined with broken bottles, a small red winked alive and slid across Thomas Reed's chest. The red slid across Thomas Reed's chest like a cruel fingertip. Rachel gasped. Mercer threw herself sideways, shoving Thomas down. The sniper's shot cracked, glass raining from the alley wall. Crowley fired upward at the roofline, his round sparking against metal. Alvarez dragged Rachel behind a dumpster, blood still damp on his sleeve. Chaos fractured the night. Sirens screamed closer. SUVs revved. Smoke from the upholstery shop still coiled across the block. Thomas lay in the wet grit, breath short, staring at the sky. For a second, he thought he saw the boy from the village again, his hand outstretched. Then he blinked, and it was just rain. "Move!" Mercer barked. Crowley threw another volley to pin the sniper. Thomas, stubborn and staggering, pushed to his feet. "Not running this time," he growled. He charged across the alley, ducking low, knife still in hand. Crowley cursed and followed, covering him. The sniper fired again, clipping brick. But Thomas climbed the fire escape like he was back in Kandahar. At the roofline, he tackled the shooter. The rifle skidded away. Fists, knees, rain, and rage blurred together. Thomas slammed the man's head into the gravel. "Who sent you?" he roared. The man spat blood and grinned. "Same man you once eluded." Thomas froze. The pause almost killed him. The sniper drew a knife. But Crowley's shot ended it, the blade falling harmlessly. Thomas collapsed, shaking. Crowley pulled him up. "Next time," he said, "laugh at me for saving your life." Thomas almost smiled. Almost. Meanwhile, Rachel's phone buzzed in her palm. The choice screen had vanished. Instead, new text appeared. Upload complete. Archive seated worldwide. Her breath caught. They had it. The full story wasn't in her bag anymore. It was out there, mirrors, journalists, watchdogs, all with copies. No one could kill it now. Alvarez leaned against the wall, eyes wet. Then maybe it was worth it. Rachel looked at him sharply. "Why?" "Because I sold my soul trying to keep it buried," he whispered. "Now maybe the boy gets to live in truth, even if he didn't in life." At dawn, federal agents stormed Clearbrook. But this time, they weren't there to cover. They were there to answer. Screens from Europe to Asia blared headlines. Iron Dagger files released, civilian deaths covered up. General Nathan Kincaid named in leaked archive. Kincaid appeared at a press podium, immaculate in suit and scowl. He tried to spin it. Complex battlefield decisions distorted context, a smear against honorable service. But as the footage played, Reed dragging the child, Kincaid barking orders, words collapsed. And behind the cameras, veterans in wheelchairs saluted Thomas Reed, not the general. The tide had turned. But victories don't come free. Alvarez died 2 days later from blood loss complications. His name didn't trend. His funeral was small, a flag folded by hands that didn't know his story. Crowley resigned from the force, handing his badge to Mercer. "I mocked a man who deserved better," he told her. "Now I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be someone worth laughing at." Rachel's podcast was subpoenaed, threatened, dissected, but the story kept spreading, copied too many times to contain. And Thomas? He sat on the same Main Street curb weeks later, this time with no sign, no cup, just his scarred hands and tired eyes. People stopped, some to thank him, some to stare, some unsure what to say. He said little. The medals never mattered to him. The truth did. Thomas Reed's story was never about a cop's cruel laughter. It was about how quickly we judge the broken by what we see, and how much weight they carry that we don't. It was about power that buries shame, and ordinary people who choose to dig it back up. It was about a man who lost everything but still chose to stand, even when standing meant facing the ghosts that hunted him. As the credits roll in your mind, and the streets of Clearbrook fade, ask yourself, when you pass the man on the corner with a cardboard sign, do you see a burden, or do you ask what battles he's already fought for you? Because sometimes the difference between a nobody and a hero isn't their story. It's whether we choose to listen. If you found this story interesting, make sure you subscribe, comment, like, and share for more.